over 3,000 years ago, Moses advised people to number their days so that they might live wisely. How did Moses gain that eternal perspective? This is Jackie Anderson. I'm a missionary in Ethiopia, and I'm doing these RX Prescription for Joy videos to encourage you to live and walk closely with God. This is the second video in a series on Psalm 90. Understanding the life of Moses will help us to more deeply understand his psalm and his advice. The life of Moses could be divided into 3 sections of 40 years each. First, he started out as a beautiful baby that was placed in the river Nile because the Egyptians were killing Israelite babies. The daughter of Pharaoh drew him out of the Nile and gave him the name Moses, which means drawn out. So the first section of his life was lived in luxury, in privilege, probably with servants waiting on him, with the role that he was the son of Pharaoh's daughter. After 40 years of this, he decided he didn't want it. He wanted to identify and help his own people. But he did it in his own way, and he ended up killing an Egyptian, which caused him to be drawn out of that life of privilege and now running away to the wilderness to live as a shepherd. 40 years spent as a shepherd, learning humbleness, getting married, having children, and learning more about God. So then God draws him out of that life, which I don't know how comfortable it was, but it was a life that was simple and plain, gets drawn out, sent back to Egypt, and confronts Pharaoh about letting his people go. The third 40 years of Moses' life is again spent in the wilderness. He is with the people of over 1 million people. He is their leader. He has an amazing experience with God the Father, but he's also just moving from place to place in the wilderness for 40 years. During that time, he writes the first 5 books of the Bible. What an amazing story. Moses was drawn out of his different lives in order to have an identity with God's kingdom. He now has a higher purpose, a significance, and an amazing ministry. In the same way, I like to think I was drawn out of a life of darkness and placed into God's kingdom, which is the most important kingdom of all, that gives me significance and value. God gives us insight into the life of Moses in Hebrews 11, verses 24 through 26. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. These verses are key to understanding Moses' advice in Psalm 90. Notice that he makes 4 main choices. First, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. That is an identity thing. Second, he chooses ill treatment over pleasures. Third, he looks to the eternal rewards. And fourth, he chooses to leave Egypt in faith. Choosing our identity greatly influences how we live. When Moses made the choice to be identified with the Israelites rather than with the Egyptians, it affected all his choices after that. I choose to be identified with God's kingdom, to be His child. In His kingdom, I have great significance and value. Look at this word, considering. Considering is gathering facts, looking and thinking, and then coming to a decision. This is not an impulsive choice. Notice that Moses thought about the ill treatment, the wrath, the loss of pleasures, the reproach. He looked at these passing pleasures and he made a choice. Who would he follow? Ask yourself, who will you follow? This is like Christ asking us to count the cost of being his disciple. Some people would say, Moses, you are crazy. Why would you give up all this life, these pleasures, these comfort, these servants, and be identified with wrath from the king? You're giving up too much. Well, people said that about my husband, an orthopedic surgeon who gave up his private practice and moved to Ethiopia. They said, you're crazy. Look at all the income you have given up. Look at all the comfort you have given up. You've left your home. You've left your family. Why are you doing that? Hebrews says that Moses learned to trust in God. It says it was by faith. By faith means that it's confident that someone is reliable. And Moses believed that God was someone to trust. And he believed God's reward that was promised would be great. Moses suffered a loss, but think of what he gained. He was able to go into the Holy of Holies of the tabernacle and be in God's presence. He had a mountaintop experience more than once where he spent days in God's presence. God spoke to him, gave him the 10 Commandments. God was there for him in an amazing way. Moses also looked forward to a reward. What was that? Well, we'll look more at that word in the coming weeks. The lesson today for us is to learn from Moses. He understood that this world is temporary. It will not last. This is not the kingdom of God today. There is a future kingdom, a new heaven and a new earth coming. So don't be fooled by teachers who are talking about prosperity today, about comfort today, about living only for this world. It's just not the lasting kingdom that you want to be part of. Learn from Moses. It says he endured because his eyes were seeing Jesus. His eyes had an eternal perspective, and that's what we need, to keep on enduring. Things can be hard. You might be in a difficult marriage. You might be raising a difficult child. You might be disappointed with your job or your neighbors. But God says, endure for his sake. Be faithful. He has a plan for us. So teach us to number our days that we might have a heart of wisdom. God is encouraging us to have an eternal perspective that will affect not only how we think, but how we act on a daily basis.